This is a video about two sculptures I made, one of Camille Claudel and the other of Rodin. Most of you know Rodin's work, so I have a question for you. Look at this beautiful sculpture. Do you know who sculpted it? Or this. Look at the movement, the sensual intoxication. Oh yes, this is a beautiful moment, a bit of poetry, frozen in bronze. And this piece. These were all sculpted by Camille Claudel. A few years ago, I went to France to study Rodin's work. What I came back with was a profound love and respect for the work of Camille. I felt that I understood them and connected with them in ways that only a sculptor can. My passion for sculpture is no less than theirs, so I decided to honor them by sculpting their portraits. So I have another question for you. If you decided to sculpt them, how would you do it? How would you get at them? I decided to start with Camille. This photo was taken in 1884. She was 20 years old. There is no doubt in my mind that she identified strongly with Rodin's work. Over time, she fell deeply in love with him, and for a decade they worked together. Sculpture flowed like love letters between the two. I love this portrait. Look at the slight upward tilt of her head, suggesting an impatience to get back to work. And then there are those sad yet beautiful eyes. How could anyone not love her? This is a photograph of her taken 43 years later. What happened to that beautiful woman? In this photograph, when I look into her eyes, I see resignation. This was taken when she was 63, and by that time, she had spent many years in an asylum. Camille had gone insane and was committed by her family. This photograph was taken in 1929, and it's the last one we have of her. At this point, I realized that there were three Camilles, so I decided to sculpt them, reconstructing the three moments in her life. 1884, the young, vibrant Camille, 1907, when she was going insane, and then in 1929. So here she is. What a time that must have been for her. So much hope for the future. But as time passed, she realized that Rodin would not leave Rose, his common-law wife. So she ended the affair. But by then, Camille was becoming a serious competitor to Rodin. As Camille tried to establish herself, there were several obstacles. She had lived out of wedlock. She was a female in a male-dominated art world. And Rodin marginalized her. To be fair, at the same time he tried to look after her. How complex human relationships are. Camille refused to limit herself to making small decorative sculptures. Her pride, her ambition, and the gathering storm of her mental illness stood in her way. Thus the tragedy took its inevitable course. Commissions dried up. Lonely, overworked, the focus of scandal, she began her decline into aggressive paranoia and delusions. Here she is in 1907. You can hear the voices in her head. You can feel the confusion. Of all the horrors one can experience in this world, losing one's mind in isolation must be the worst. At 43, her creative powers abandoned her completely. She barricaded herself into her apartment and only went out at night. It became obvious that her mental state was deteriorating. The symptoms of madness, which manifested themselves in the 1890s, were becoming even more acute. In 1913, at the request of her mother, she would be dragged from her apartment and placed into asylum for the mentally insane. She would never sculpt again. What a loss. The rolling waves in the last piece represent time rolling over her. She died on October 19, 1943, at the age of 79. During the last years of her life, she wrote, "I won't recount my life. I don't want to sadden you. I'm in an abyss. My dream of life has become a nightmare." That's why I titled the work, The Tragedy of Camille Claudel. Next was to sculpt Rodin. From a sculptor's perspective, he was easy. He loved frowning for the camera and showing off those deep-set eyes of his. He had a glorious nose and an endless beard. Here's a portrait by Malvina Hoffman, his last student. And here's Camille's take on him. So how to capture him? I felt the world didn't need another realistic portrait. If I knew him personally, I would probably try to bring out his inner being like he did so beautifully with Balzac. Instead, I decided to weave into his hair the thoughts that were in his mind. All these smaller sculptures relate to works of his or works he admired. Most of these works are by Rodin, but for the last one, I chose a piece by Camille. I have placed this one close to his ear. The work is called The Implorer.